Yeah. Welcome and welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got another great show for you. It's Tuesday night on a college football week, and we're heading into championship weekend. And rivalry weekend is just over, so you know what that means. My guy, Ryan Lankford, the Format Podcast official college football analyst, is going to join us to talk all things college football playoff. Can't wait for that one. It's a great discussion. If you're a college football fan, you really need to tune in. But if you haven't already and you're here on YouTube, please click that subscribe, that like, that notification bell so you can be kept aware of whenever new content drops on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast, and we should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, please give us that like and that 5-star review and drop us a comment. We appreciate it. Make sure you share the podcast with other sports fans you know that might want to hear a different voice than the typical that you would hear in the mainstream sports media. You do all that, you know what happens. Helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. Bruce Hope, Ryan Lankford, college football. Let's get right to it. What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Got another great episode of the Format Podcast. And, I got my guy here, Ryan Lankford, the official Format Podcast college football analyst. Ryan Lankford, as we know, is a former Division I wide receiver with the Fighting Illini and former Indianapolis Colt, as well as former Canadian Football League wide receiver and kick return specialist. What's going on, man? Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me back again. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it, man. An amazing college football weekend last weekend, man. Some incredible games to end out the season in terms of rivalry week. And well, obviously, you know where we have to start, man. Rivalry week had two of the best games we've maybe ever seen. And first and foremost, for me anyway, because I'm not an SEC guy, I'm sure if you are, then this would be flipped. But that Michigan-Ohio State game, I thought was incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. What are your opening thoughts on that before I start, asking you a little more?
I thought it was a good game too. It was enjoyable to watch. It came down to the end. It was, back and forth, two teams that were playing good ball and guys were making plays, which was fun to see.
Yeah.
So it ended how it ended, but I enjoyed it. I definitely did.
That got your Big Ten juices flowing, man?
It did. It definitely did. And I love the Big House too. Like the Big House is just such an iconic stadium. And the atmosphere is crazy. There's a big thing. Those fans want to make a difference. And it's just something about, blue and gold, just a clean color in my mind, So
yeah. And it's funny, as you mentioned, the Big House, the Big House was about 105,000 capacity, and then of course you got the shoe on the other side, the horseshoe, Ohio State,
which is also crazy too,
about 105, right? And you, unlike most of us, have had the opportunity to come out of the tunnel in both of those stadiums, so you know how it feels to be there and hear the roar of the crowd and all that. And for those of you that haven't watched this show before and you're just tuning in for the first time, I know that Ryan holds a special feeling for the Big House, and because he scored his first touchdown as a Division I wide receiver in the Big House. So that I can imagine was a pretty cool freaking memory to have, man.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It
Absolutely.
really was.
So kind of what I want to know from you, some things I was thinking about as we're, taking notes, and I was sending you the rundown. First thing I want to ask you, what does this win say about Michigan? Obviously, Harbaugh, their head coach, not being there, the whole Michigan against the world, and the program could be in major trouble with the sign stealing and all this crap. What does this say to you about Michigan and this program?
Well, they're a good team. They're winning games, and it's it's hard to really appreciate it, I think, because of kind of what's going on. But at the same time, they're playing good football, and the players are making plays when they need to make plays. And I think from a football player mentality and mindset, they are really doing a good job of showing how they can capitalize and battle against adversity. Right? It is Michigan against the world. Everyone is pointing fingers. Everyone is at them. Their backs are against the wall. I mean, their head coach is getting thrown to the fire. Guys are getting thrown to the fire. And they're really all they got. So from a former athlete mentality, it's cool to see those, band of brothers kind of come together and keep hope alive, if you will, from their perspective.
So kind of to expand on that a little bit, what does this say to you about Jim Harbaugh's impact as a coach, because obviously we know that he wasn't able to coach the last 3 games. I mean, he
Yeah.
was obviously in practice all week, helping to prepare the
Mm-hmm.
football team and playing a big role there.
Mm-hmm.
But what does this say about the impact on this
Mm-hmm.
team and the way he's built it, that they were
Mm-hmm.
able to keep rolling and, despite all the adversity you just talked about?
Yeah, his impact is strong because it is different on game day when your head coach is not there. Even though offensive coordinator is going to call his plays, defensive coordinator is going to call his plays, but it does say something to not have a head coach there. It also shows that he has great leadership within the team, whether
Okay.
deeper than the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. He's got players probably in each skill position, in each skill group that kind of get their guys together because you need that. You need leaders within the team to kind of keep things rolling. And we can't overlook head coaches stepping in place for him. And I think that that's important too. It is a challenge. It's a challenging job to kind of step in as the interim head coach when things are kind of going on and the ship seem to be sailing the same way. So I think Harbaugh has done a good job of kind of keeping the ship going, but not really on him, if you will. But they definitely have leadership within the locker room, especially the players that are able to go out and do what they need to do.
Right. So before we talk a little bit about Sharon Moore, who did just an incredible job over this 3-game stretch, um, you mentioned the leaders in the skill groups. So I don't know if you heard, I think it was Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson making some comments. I guess he was asked either about comments the Ohio State receivers made, or I
Hmm.
guess something they got into with them. And he said something along the lines of, well, they want to act hard, but we know they're not tough. We see they got the $1,000 outfits on and the Louis
Hmm.
Vuitton shoes, but we saw the film and we know they're not tough.
Hmm.
What do you think about those comments? And the reason I ask you that, it's unusual, maybe if he's talking about the DBs from the opposing side, I get it,
Hmm.
but it's
Hmm.
unusual that someone would say this about the same position group on the other side that he doesn't have to go up against directly. And I get
Hmm.
it. Those wide receivers from Michigan kind of have a tough mentality, being that Michigan is such a physical team and a running team. They have to block a lot more than
Hmm.
the Ohio State receivers do. But what did you take from those comments, and what did you think about that?
Well, I think he's given something to kind of get his guys going. But there is some truth to what he's saying because the film
I
doesn't
agree.
lie.
Yeah.
And every player watches film differently. There's different cut ups and different tapes that you can see, and there's different things that you can talk about with the opposite side of the ball within your locker room of like, hey, I picked this up on film as a receiver. I'm seeing this. Let me tell you what this means. When you're doing scout team during the week and you're having to show them what these guys are going to be running, and you can talk to these guys about, hey, this is really what they're trying to attack. This is
Mhm.
really what they're doing. If you got a great coach in place, your defense coordinator is going to tell you based on what they're running, why they're running it, and how they're trying to attack us. But I really think he was just trying to get some juice going and say that our guys are great. Our guys are better than them, and we're not we show up on film and we dress to impress probably too. But they definitely saying that they show up on film. So that's how he was, I think, stirring the pot a little bit.
Gotcha. All right. So we mentioned Sharon Moore, Michigan's offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, who
Hmm.
has been the interim head coach for the last 3 games while Harbaugh was on suspension. And he's getting a lot of flowers, over the last few days for the job that he did.
He
And
deserves it.
realistically, it's outstanding that he, being an interim, outcoached one of the better coaches in the country in Ryan Day. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts on the job Sharon Moore has done while he stepped in for Jim Harbaugh?
Well, I think he's doing a great job in stepping in. I think it's hard to step in a position like this because you don't train for it. You don't
Mm-hmm.
plan to be in a position where all of this extra media that's not football related is thrown on top of you now being a head coach that you didn't start as a head coach at the beginning of the season. So I think that's one thing that's important. And I think that he is doing enough work to have some schools around the country say, "Hey, could we have him as a HC? Could he be a head coach in our program?" Because he's handling adversity well, and it doesn't look like the ship is burning while he's,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, kind of the head of the hold.
Right. No, I think he did a fantastic job and he's getting a lot of positive attention. And one thing I wanted to touch on is that before we move on is that we're hearing that if Jim Harbaugh does move on to the NFL, or he's, something goes on and he's no longer the Michigan head coach, then Sharon Moore will definitely be one of the prime candidates for the Michigan head coaching job. Now, that said, he's done a great job, but my 2 cents on that is that if I'm looking for a guy, first call I'm making, if I'm Michigan and Harbaugh's not there, I'm calling David Shaw and see if he can follow up at Michigan with Jim Harbaugh the exact same way he did at Stanford. Keep it going. We know that David Shaw knows all about recruiting smart kids to deal with an academic institution. We know that he has a very similar style in terms of the way he calls plays and the way he runs an offense. Physical offensive line in the trenches, running the football, pass off of that, can recruit and coach quarterbacks extremely well. We saw that. Andrew Luck, I mean, he sent a few guys to the league. So, I think that would be the first call I would be making. I don't know that I would be so quick to make Sharon Moore the prime candidate, because as good a job as he's done, Michigan is a huge program, and there's a lot more to managing a program like that, as you well know, than just, game day or preparation during the week. There's a lot more to it. But that's, right. That's my 2 cents. Moving on. Let's flip it to the other side, Ohio State now. Should Ryan Day be on the hot seat? And before you answer that, Ohio State, he's got a record of 55-6, I believe. And he's 1-3 versus Michigan, which is the big one, and 2-4 against top 5 opponents. Should he be on the hot seat after this loss?
I personally don't think so. I do think that he's got to get a national championship under his belt. I think that they're always in the ranks for could make it all the way, but don't. And I think he's right on that cusp of like, all right, he just needs one of those to solidify, like, all right, he can do the job, and I think that's kind of where he's at. So I don't think they're at a position where they're looking at him like, hey, we got to get him out and we need to rebuild. But I think they are looking at the clock like, okay, it's year 4, year 5. All right, now, like we're getting closer every year. So when is it going to happen?
Yeah. No, I agree. But I think that the benefit to him is the 12-team playoff next year, because, he doesn't have to worry about if he loses this game, he doesn't get in. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of this game going forward with the change in the playoff layout. But he is one of the best coaches in America. I think that's fair. And we saw that. They took Georgia to the limit last year. If they don't miss that kick in the semifinals, he probably has a national championship now. So there's that. What did Michigan and Ohio State both show you in this game after blowout wins for the Wolverines over the past 2 seasons? What did you see there?
I saw that both of these teams played great football. And I think that for these two programs, they're right at the cusp of continual greatness, if that makes sense. I think they're both building up real strong. Their pieces are coming together. They're building that continuity because things are kind of flowing. They're meshing well. New rules with the league, NIL deal, transfer portal. It's really helping them kind of build back their old traditional programs of when they were dominating. So I think that they're right at that point, and we'll see how the playoffs run down and ultimately who makes it to the national championship.
Yeah, no, definitely. I thought that one of the big things, especially after Ohio State's second win at Notre Dame earlier in the season, Ryan Day made it a real point to talk about how him and his team heard the comments about how they're not tough, they're not physical, and of course people would think that. We've discussed that all season. Based on what's happened against Michigan the last 2 years, how they basically got, physically dominated and manhandled. And it's odd. I don't know. They say styles make fights. I guess matchups really matter, because they got physically dominated versus Michigan the past 2 years. But then last year they went toe-to-toe with eventual national champion Georgia in the playoff, right? So I don't know. But I thought that you could see that Ohio State really made a concerted effort to be more physical and to get tougher in the trenches and to, try to run the football more effectively this season and not just rely on elite playmakers on the outside. Now, some of that I think may have had to do with the fact that they didn't have the same level of quarterback this past year. You know, they had CJ Stroud for 2 years before that, and of course for 2 years before that, Justin Fields. So, you know, they had elite quarterback play before, and they don't quite have that this year. So I saw that they definitely made that more concerted effort. They were more physical, but I think Michigan probably just wanted it more. And Michigan's elite defense was able to make plays when it counted most. They got the pick early and they got the pick late to seal it. So, yeah, you know, see, as it's so funny, as much as they want to, you know, the powers that be, especially the gambling powers that are involved now, want high flying, high scoring offense. At the end of the day, certain things will always remain the same. Run the ball, stop the run. If you can do that, you'll have a lot of success. And Michigan is showing you that. Ohio State is showing you that. Georgia's showing you that. Alabama is consistently showing you that. Now, if you can add elite quarterback and receiver play to that, you're nearly unstoppable. We've seen that as well. But run the ball, stop the run, man. Got to be physical. So
that's it.
Yeah. We were just kind of touching on that with the 12-team playoff coming next season, and the Big Ten is doing away with divisions. Do you feel like that changes the significance of this game?
For them, no. I think that there's so much history in their rivalry. And I think, and maybe that's not the direction that you were saying, but I think that the history behind Michigan and Ohio State is going to remain regardless of what, if it's 12-team, if it's shorter. Now, I do think the magnitude of the game could change depending on where they're at later on in the season, because as you said, when it's only 4 teams getting in, that one loss week towards the end could knock you down 5 spots, could knock you out of the playoffs if other people would do some things. I do think it will make it's still going to be competitive, but knowing that there's a little bit more gap, it might not affect or drop you out as much.
Right. So how I was looking at that, and that's a good way. I didn't even think about it that way. I was kind of looking at it like, okay, like how Ohio State lost this game today. So for the next 364 days or whatever, they got to stew on this, right? So let's say this is next year now, and let's just say Michigan wins, right? Or Michigan loses. Ohio State takes back control of the season. Chances are Michigan and Ohio State are, again, the 2 best teams in the conference. So guess what? They'll play again the following week for the Big Ten championship because there's no divisions, right? And let's just say, hypothetically, they're both top 12 teams. They'll both make the playoffs, and they could possibly face each other 3 times in maybe a 6-week stretch, right? So maybe some people would say that the significance of the game, which is, you know, the final game on their schedule every season, may lose some of its luster, because you know that, okay, we'll probably be playing again the following week, and then we got a chance again to possibly match up in the playoff. Your thoughts?
No, I feel that. That makes sense. That makes sense because in that scenario, they literally could play 3 times, and that would it would just be like, all right, what is this, baseball now? Like, I mean, how many times y'all gonna play each other? So that could happen, and I could see that happening to other teams, just in general, just by, you know, I could see that happening for some SEC situations. I could see that happening for some Big Ten situations like that. And I think fans would rather not see that type of stuff happen. But I think with 12 different teams and the dynamics, and we'll see how the committee really, really runs when this 12-team thing really starts rolling out. But I would rather not see them play 3 times in 6 weeks.
Right. I wonder how the majority of fans would feel about that. That's interesting. I think there is something to looking ahead to this game for an entire year. So we'll see.
Well, it's always going to be circled. It's always going to be circled from and on Ohio State. They're always going to circle Michigan because that's the game. Michigan, they're always going to have Ohio State circled. Like, that's just. I think that's going to stay true regardless what happens.
Well, yeah, no, I agree, but maybe it wouldn't hurt so much, because in the NFL, obviously it's a different sport, but in the NFL you have situations where you play your division rivals twice every season, and then because they're in your conference, you may end up playing them again in the playoffs. So but that doesn't seem to hurt, ratings or the fans' desire to see that. So I don't know.
That's
I guess
true.
we'll have to find
That's
out.
true.
All right,
That's true.
let's take it to the SEC. This is a game I know you were super excited about, and I know you were glued to it. Did you go? Alabama and Auburn? Were you at the Iron
Didn't
Bowl?
go. Didn't
Okay.
go to it. Watched it. But just
Yeah,
incredible
yeah, yeah.
game. And the Iron Bowl always comes down to those to
Doesn't
the
it? Something
last bits
crazy,
of the
right?
game. It's crazy always.
Yeah. So it's always something crazy though. And this time you had Jalen Milroe. He completes the fourth down. Eh, Man, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't even know what to say about it, man. What are your thoughts on how wild the ending of that game was?
I was speechless. I mean,
Yeah,
it was crazy. I
yeah.
felt I enjoyed it as a fan, obviously rooting for Alabama, and I would love to see what this now will do to the SEC championship, which I'm sure we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about later. But I was glad to see them, win. Um, Felt for Bama or felt for Auburn of just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like I would have been devastated if I was
Yeah,
in the stands, if I
yeah.
was on the defense, if I was, I would have been
Mm-hmm.
just devastated because that's one play that we need all 11 guys to give 100% assignment,
Mm-hmm.
and we couldn't get it. Now, we know every game doesn't come down to that final play, but there are about six key plays in the
Yeah.
game, and it just hates when that break breaking play is
Mm-hmm.
the last play of the game, and you lose like that on a perfect throw,
Yeah.
a great
Yeah. I couldn't
catch. You
believe that.
can't get that overlooked. That was a perfect ball,
Yeah.
a great catch, the ability to have the body control, get your feet in bounds, and
Mm-hmm.
and seal it like that, because that
Yeah.
was nuts.
But
They shouldn't have got it, but they got
no,
it.
but what was that? 4th and 31, and for whatever reason, Hugh Freeze decides to keep a spy on Jalen Milroe like that. Like you take a
Hmm.
defender out of coverage when you know he has
Hmm.
to throw it to keep a spy
Hmm.
on him. He wasn't going to pick up 31. Like, come on. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, that
I
I
don't think
think
so
that's
either.
something he's going to have to live with for a long time. So you mentioned that the game had, about six key plays as most games do. Was there one that you thought was kind of the turning point in the game for you?
There was a few turning moments, I think, like momentum changers.
Mm-hmm.
Few questionable calls, like they were talking about the face mask call.
Mm-hmm.
Bama missing a field goal really hurt in the third quarter. They
Right.
missed that field goal. They didn't score again literally until the last play of the game, right? So that took a lot of momentum. The Alabama or Auburn muffed the punt. That gave Alabama a lot of momentum. So those plays like that really affected the game, and those will be the turning points for me. The biggest one was probably that field goal that Bama missed.
Okay.
That kind of gave or Auburn some juice. Like, all right, this
Mm-hmm.
might be it. They kind of
Right.
turned up for a little bit and
Right.
then laxed on, unfortunately, the last play of the game,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
gave it up.
Right. How good is Jalen Milroe?
I love him, man. He's a competitor,
Yeah, he's a
and
real gamer, isn't he?
he also seems like a great kid too, like a great
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
I love his after game interviews.
I did too. I
He's
did too.
always saying roll tide. He always has this positive energy,
Mm-hmm.
and I can always appreciate when Nick Saban and him talk and interact.
Mm-hmm.
Their player coach relationship looks very natural, looks very
Right.
real, looks very I got your back, you got my back kind of thing. And I think that's what is so beautiful in sports.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
to see that on that level is cool, and I'm pulling for him. I mean, I think playing in the game, he played a little kind of indecisive sometimes. He had a few
Mm-hmm.
penalties where he didn't, holding the ball to or crossing the line of
Yep.
scrimmage and
Yep.
illegal pass, things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted him to just be more confident and say, hey, if I'm gonna tuck it and run, go ahead and run. If I'm gonna tuck it
Mm-hmm.
and keep looking, tuck it and keep looking, but make the decision and roll with it because you're a player. Once he
Right.
gets moving, he makes plays. So, um, yeah, I think he's a top quarterback for sure.
Did Bama win or did Auburn lose?
Auburn lost. I think
Mm.
as a Bama fan and watcher, I hate to say it, but I think Auburn had a lax when they didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
You can, kind of count that last play. You can count penalties. You can count errors, missed assignments, things like that. Um, but I think just how it all kind of went down at the end, Alabama or Auburn kind of gave it up, right? You just had to just do the bare minimum when you needed it most, and unfortunately couldn't do it.
Okay. Okay, here's the big one, right? And we're gonna talk more about this later, but
Mm-hmm.
does Bama have a real chance against Georgia in the SEC championship game?
Yes.
At, I'm with
I
you
think
1000%.
you can never count Alabama out. You can never count out Nick
Mm-hmm.
Saban. I mean, I think he's one of the greatest college coaches, ever that
Absolutely.
we'll see in our lifetime. So
Mm-hmm.
you can never count Alabama out. I think the country believes that Georgia is just super powerful and dominant, which
Mm-hmm.
they are. But
Yep.
that is prime real estate for Alabama to
Yes,
come
it
in and win the
is.
game.
Yes, it is.
So, and with the committee being the committee, Alabama wins this game. We don't know what can happen,
Oh,
but the committee's going to have to work,
we'll get to that.
especially
We'll
with
get to that.
all the other stuff
Oh yeah.
that could happen.
Oh, we're gonna get to that. Trust me.
So,
All
but
right.
yeah, so that's how I feel. I think you can never count them out.
I think
Um,
Alabama has a very legitimate chance to win this game. They are
and
one
they're
of the few
rolling right
teams.
now.
Yeah. They're one of the few teams in the country that can match up player for player with Georgia. I don't think
Yep.
there's any difference in talent. I don't think Kirby Smart is coaching as well as anybody, but at the end of the day, if there's going to be a coaching advantage, you got to give it to Saban. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's the GOAT. He's arguably the GOAT
Mm-hmm.
in college football. I think Tommy Rees has really kind of got this thing figured out offensively in terms of his personnel and his scheme and what he wants to run. The
Mm-hmm.
Alabama defense is looking like the old Alabama defense, and I don't believe, I could be wrong, I don't believe Georgia has enough playmakers on the outside. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
if Alabama can control their run game, I don't know if Carson Beck's going to be able to beat them throwing it because I don't think they have enough playmakers on the outside.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah.
Could be wrong, but that's what I see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be an exciting game because
Yeah.
it's going to come down to the playmakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're matched up like that, someone's going to have to step up. Someone who doesn't normally step up is going to have to step up to take their team over the edge, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be exciting to see who that player is going to be, and when they're going to make the plays.
Right. Right. All right. So it's Tuesday, so that means that the college football rankings for this week have come out, and so we'll talk about that. Mainly, of course, what do we want to talk about? That top 5 or 6, right? And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
there are some extremely good one-loss teams in the top 10. I'll tell you what. But let's
Yeah.
start with number 1, as it probably should be, and that's Georgia. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Michigan. Number 3, Washington. I like that. Number 4,
Mm-hmm.
Florida State. Number 5, Oregon. Number 6, Ohio State. Number 7, Texas. Number 8, Alabama. Number 9, Missouri. For no reason. Well, we know the reason. Number 10, Penn State. A really good top 10 there. Anything there that stands out to you?
Washington coming up to 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was an interesting move. I
Mm-hmm.
like the move though. I do
Yeah.
like the move.
Yeah.
That move definitely adds a lot of weight to this next week.
Absolutely.
With how it is, and I think that is why I like where they're placed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're
Florida
gonna find
State,
out anyway in a few days.
yeah, we are. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm cool with where they're at.
Yeah.
I'm cool
Yeah.
with how they did this.
Me too. I'll tell you. Obviously, Florida State being the the 4th undefeated team in the country.
Hmm.
I'm cool with them being at number 4, but I'll tell you what really irritated me, and that was Paul Feinbaum. I think he was on the SEC morning show on Saturday, and they
Hmm.
asked him about this, and he's saying that if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, put them in. He doesn't care what Florida State has done. And I'm like,
Hmm.
this is absurd. Florida State will be undefeated. And because you want to push the SEC narrative, you're going to say
Hmm.
put Alabama in if they win the SEC championship. Why should
Hmm.
Alabama, in any case, no matter what they do, be ahead of Texas, who went to their house and beat them? Like,
Hmm.
how are we continuing to ignore this? Right? I mean, does that win not mean anything? What are we playing games for if we just
Hmm.
disregarding? The committee said themselves now, this is not me. The committee said, and they said this years ago, that they value head-to-head matchups as one of the cleanest tiebreakers. So if Alabama and Texas both finish with one loss, but Texas beat Bama head-to-head at Bama by double digits now, how on earth, besides SEC bias, would Alabama get ranked ahead of Texas? Absurd.
Mm, Could it come down to strength of schedule? Because I'm also hearing that.
It,
Because
it could, but it shouldn't. Strength of schedule should fall behind head-to-head matchup because you can say, okay, I played a better schedule than you, and that's cool. But then if that makes me weaker because I played a better schedule, what does it say that I went to your house and beat you by double digits, right? So strength of schedule should in no way stand ahead of a head-to-head matchup. You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you.
That's
I'm with
crazy.
you.
And that
I'm
really,
with you.
like, as you can see, that really irritated me when I heard that. When I heard Fine Ball, I'm like, bro, you can't be serious right now. You can't be serious. But he was very serious.
Yeah.
Now, can Florida State win a national championship without Jordan Travis? No, I seriously doubt it.
Yeah. I don't think
However,
so.
we also said that in 2014 when Cardale Jones, I believe the third string quarterback, stepped in for Ohio State. Were you still in college in 2014?
20. I was done, not playing anymore. But yeah,
Okay.
that
Right.
that would have been the year I graduated 13, but
Okay.
14 was my class.
Okay. So you remember Cardale Jones steps in. He's the third stringer at Ohio State and helps to lead them with Ezekiel Elliott to a championship.
Yep.
Nobody thought that was going to happen, right? They go, I
Yep.
think they smoke Wisconsin like 59-0 in the Big Ten title game, right? And then they go on the run. They beat up Bama in the semis, and then I think they beat Oregon maybe. But the point is, they won the national championship, but nobody thought they were going to do that. So I'm really frustrated with this business of you don't get what you earn, right? It's like I think James Madison, they stepped up to FBS from FCS this season, right? And spent most of the season ranked, lower half of the 20s, right? But they were ranked. They lost, I believe, one game this year. But you have some stupid rule that says when you change divisions that you're not eligible for postseason play. And I'm like, how ridiculous is that? They came up, they beat everybody on their schedule, and even if they had gone undefeated, they couldn't play in a bowl game. I'm like, why are we even playing games if the games don't matter? What's going on here?
Yeah. And I'm interested because when they do open this up to 12 teams, those are the type of teams you want to see make it in. And see if they can go on a run, see if they can really make it to the top, because that's exciting. That gives you that, almost that college basketball type of feel where these very small schools end up making it all the way, and you're like, man, like, they play too. They got some players too.
So I think
Now,
it's exciting, and you think it's exciting, but the powers that be don't want a chance that the little guy is going to come in there and upset the proverbial apple cart. They don't want that, right? Because if you look at it, I've always been a proponent of an 8 or 12 team playoff, so I'm happy it expanded. However, one thing I was saying, and this is before you became a regular on the show, one thing I was saying was, if you want to go 12 teams, put a cap on how many teams from each conference can be there, because we know what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to turn it into the SEC Invitational. I guarantee you're going to have years where 4 SEC teams make the 12 team playoffs, and we don't need that. Like that's not what it should be about. Just put the teams in there, but we know what's going to happen, right? You're probably going to have at any given point maybe 3 Big Ten, maybe 4 Big Ten, 4 or 5 SEC. You're going to have your one group of 5 qualifier, and then it's like whatever. So I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. For me personally, it should be each of the Power 5 champions, and then whoever else makes it in. But
I like
that
the
would
cap
make too
idea.
much sense. Yeah,
I didn't even think
absolutely.
about it like that. That makes sense. And they could be very similar to how it is now with the 4 teams within top divisions, and then y'all kind of make it in. That'd be cool.
Yeah, so that's me.
Maybe they'll change it. I mean, it took a while to get this 12, so we might be it might be years from now, but it could be in the works.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I get passionate about this thing. When I see the BS, it really gets on my nerves. But let's move along from the rankings. So before I do that, real quick, does Louisville have a chance to upset Florida State in the ACC title game?
Absolutely.
I think so too.
Absolutely.
That's a good football team.
Love Coach Brom, by the way. Coach Brom
Mm-hmm.
recruited me to go to FAU.
Mm-hmm.
Almost went there, then he got to Illinois, and I ended up going to Illinois. So always been a
Right.
fan of Coach Brom.
Right.
Um, know his style, know how he is as a person, and how he is as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a good team. Now they had a few losses towards the end of the season, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
take
tough.
away that they are hungry, and they
Mhm.
also know that they are in a position that they can be the upset and
Right.
really, spoil people's Christmas, as if you
Oh
will.
yeah.
So this is gonna be a big game. This is gonna be a big game.
Right. Well, personally, I think that the committee wants Louisville to upset Florida State because that takes away one difficult decision from them, right? They don't have
That's
to worry
right.
about that. So before we get into that, let me ask you this. If you could only watch one, which conference championship game would you watch on Saturday? Is it well, I guess Friday or Saturday, but if you could only watch
hmm
one, which would it be?
hmm
The Oregon-Washington rematch, or would it be Alabama versus Georgia?
I'm gonna say Alabama versus Georgia.
Man.
Not only because of I'm interested in Alabama, but just because Georgia's number one ranked team in the country, and they've
Mm-hmm.
been playing some great
I,
football and
I
have been
think they've won
rolling.
28 straight or something like
They
that.
have been rolling through
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So of course you want to see who can take down the big dog,
Goliath, yeah.
literally the big dog.
Yeah, absolutely. True.
And then once that happens, what will happen?
Mm-hmm.
Because now the committee's in a tough place. I
Mm-hmm.
personally don't think, let's say Alabama doesn't win. I don't think they're in a position to say Georgia gets completely left out. That's hard to do. I couldn't see
Yeah.
that happening.
Yeah.
But on paper, does it make sense for them to get possibly left out? Well, I think it kind of depends on what the other games do as well. But I think it's
Yeah.
hard.
Well,
I think it's
yeah,
hard
yeah,
to
yeah.
say that they're out and they might both be in. I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if they. The only
Oh,
way for
they'll
Bama to get in, they got to win, which we all
which
know. Eh,
yeah, it would be hard to leave an SEC champ out, but then all right, we'll get to that in a second. I got you. I got you. I've been rearing to get to that part of it. But for me, I really want to see this Washington Oregon rematch because
And
I
I want
was
to watch it too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The question was one or the other, but I want to watch
Right,
it too. I can't wait to
right.
watch it.
Yeah, no, I think if I had to choose one, it's Oregon Washington.
hmm
And that could be
hmm
because I'm just not an SEC guy, but I think that's going to be an amazing game. And ESPN predictor actually has Oregon at like 74% to win that game, which I thought
Wow.
was crazy. But
Yeah.
Oregon seems to be peaking at the right time when Washington is grinding out wins. But
hmm
to me, that's also a good thing, right? Washington is finding ways to win. You can't blow
hmm
everybody out. So when you
hmm
know how to win close, it gives you that winning DNA, right? And I'm sure you're
hmm
aware of this much more than the rest of us. But when you find ways, to eke out those games, I don't
hmm
look at it as you're sneaking by with wins. I'm looking at it as you're teaching yourself as a team how to overcome adversity and win those
hmm
tight ones.
hmm That's right. That's right. Because they say don't look at the score until the game is over, right? Until it's
Mm-hmm.
triple zeros across the board, then you
Right.
look at the scoreboard. But they are showing that they are grinding some games out. And now what we
Mm-hmm.
don't know is, from a player's perspective, on the field level, what they're really thinking in their mind during the games. They could be down at halftime in the locker room, kicking it,
Mm-hmm.
chilling, comfortable, because they know who they
They
are going to
know.
come back
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
win. Or they're the people that are panicking, like, hey, we got a lot of pressure. Come on, y'all, we got to get it together. Da, 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 da. So
Mm-hmm.
we really don't know who it is. All we
Yeah.
know is at the end of the game what the final score is. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an interesting component to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's going to be, I think both games are going to be amazing.
hmm
I think they said that 13 NFL teams sent scouts to the game last week with
Wow.
Michigan and Ohio State. And pretty much whenever you have the SEC championship game, every team sends scouts there because,
hmm
I mean, yes, there's going to be great players in that game, but also, apparently
hmm
the NFL scouts and everyone else thinks that every player in the SEC is from Krypton. But that's a different thing. I'm not going to
Right,
get on that
right.
soapbox today. All right. So this is now let's get a little bit into these scenarios and whatnot, right? So
hmm
Texas and Oklahoma State playing for the Big 12 championship, right? Texas won't be in this conference for the foreseeable future. So I think it is kind of apropos that either Texas or Oklahoma ended up It would have been even better if it was both of them, but one of them, the Blue Bloods of the Big 12, ended up playing for the conference title in the last year that they're there. Now, if Texas wins and Alabama wins the SEC, right? And the other top four, the other two players in the top four stay true to form, i.e., Washington beats Oregon and remains undefeated, and Michigan beats Iowa. Who should get that final spot? Texas or Bama? Now, like we were just talking about, that the pro SEC college football media and fans are going to be screaming for Bama to get in as a one-loss SEC champ. And of course, they're also going to be saying, well, Georgia just slipped up this once, but they're still one of the four best teams. They had a 28-game win streak, blah, 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 right? But like I've been mentioning, what happens to the fact that Texas, again, I can't stop saying it, went into Tuscaloosa, went into Bryant-Denny, went in there, and Bevo smacked around the elephant, right?
They did.
Right? They did that. Double figures at Bama. Do we just ignore that? And then at that point, I guess we can't, you just finished talking about it. We can't in good conscience leave Georgia out because they slip once. They're not going, unless they get destroyed, which is not going to happen, right?
Which we don't know, but
right,
probably
I
not
can't
going
see it.
to.
Right.
Probably not me. I agree.
Right. So they're still probably going to be one of the four best teams in the country, right?
Yep.
So what does the committee do at that point? Does it do it at once and put in two SEC teams? Like, what happens there?
I don't know. And this is why I want it to happen, because I want to see what's gonna happen. Because I want them to be held to the fire. I'm not gonna lie.
Absolutely.
I kind of want to see it, because that's not my job. Y'all chose this life. Y'all have put these rules in place.
That's right.
And now these rules are gonna get tested. And now, let's see what happens,
I think they're scared to death about how this is gonna play out.
Yeah. I agree. I like that it's happening how it's happening, though. Like, with these teams are playing games. I think the only team who's not playing is Ohio State, right? Like, everyone else is
that's right. Ohio
playing
State
in something that could theoretically change. Because what if we just see a huge outlier where someone gets just destroyed, like 42-7?
Right.
And then they're looking like, oh man, well, shoot, Alabama went 42-7 or something like that. Like, whoa, like that changes. And then Texas or something. So I'm interested to see what it's gonna be. And I don't know, and I'm glad I don't know.
I think in that situation, I bet you Washington gets screwed, right? Which would really suck, because they've played a gauntlet all season long.
They have.
Texas, who did everything they were supposed to do, I think they both get screwed. But check this out. What happens now? What about if Oregon wins the Pac-12 in its final championship game, right? So now Oregon knocks out Washington. Do they get into that top four? We got all these questions.
You would say
they're one of the four best teams.
Theoretically, you would say they should, with Washington being number 3. You should at least get to 4.
That's right. That's right.
And Florida State, who's Florida State? Florida State's playing
Louisville.
Florida State's playing Louisville. They lose, they out.
Yeah, they got to win.
In that situation, they
got to win if they want a chance.
That's right.
If they want a chance.
They have to.
Yeah.
They have to. They have to. And I think that's what's Yeah.
I think that the committee they're praying. They are praying to God that everything stays perfect. Because if everything stays perfect, you just say, okay, cool. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State. Everybody wins and it stays the way it is. You got your 4. But I don't see it going that way. And to your point, I want this chaos so that we can see what type of BS the committee is going to try to feed us about who ends up getting screwed here. I can't wait. I can't wait.
What if Florida State lost? Washington lost. Alabama won.
Oh, so then I think it makes it easier for the committee. It would, but it would make it easier for the committee now to do what they want to do.
So let's say Texas, Well,
what's going to happen? They're not going to leave out a one-loss Alabama that just won the SEC, and they're not going to leave out a Georgia that's won all year, been pretty dominant, and won 28 straight in the SEC. They're not going to do it. So what you're going to have there is you are going to have Oregon, you are going to have Bama and Georgia, not necessarily in that order, and probably Michigan.
And probably Michigan.
That's probably what you're going to get. You know,
that would be crazy.
Whatever it is, I want the most chaotic situation possible.
Me too.
Because I want I want to force the committee. Yeah.
Show me your hand.
Yeah. I want to see who's gonna I want to see who they're gonna end up jerking on this thing, because you got 5 or 6 teams that deserve to be in it. You got outstanding 1-loss teams, and of course you got these 4 undefeated teams, you know? And you know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
I can't wait to see.
And it's starting Friday night.
Friday night. There it is.
Love it.
Yo. All right, man. We gonna leave it there instead of going through all these crazy doomsday scenarios. A lot of wild stuff could happen, but we're gonna leave it right there. If you're here on YouTube, again, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you stay aware whenever new content comes out. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me, man. Can't wait to get back with you next week, because next week is going to be the final one. We're going to know who's in. We're going to know who is the conference champions, and we can talk about all the BS that's undoubtedly going to go down with the committee.
You know it.
That's it, man. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Ryan. I appreciate it, and can't wait to get back with you next week.
Let's do it. I'll see you then. I appreciate you.
All right, and we're out. Peace.